My wife, Sarah, secretly ended her pregnancy and then turned the blame on me, accusing me of treating her like nothing more than a machine for having babies. The truth, however, was that she had been secretly meeting up with her high school sweetheart, Alex, and was treating his young daughter as if she were her own. When I eventually found out and confronted her, she had the audacity to claim they were just friends, that their connection was beyond romantic feelings and not what I was thinking. Today, Sarah went out shopping with her friends. I was supposed to be away on a business trip, but I had secretly come home early to set up a surprise. I had prepared everything for the new baby we were expecting. A crib, clothes, toys, and I had also bought Sarah some special gifts to celebrate the news. There was a beautiful gemstone necklace she'd admired, a limited edition handbag she wanted, and I had even made plans for a trip around the world for us after the baby arrived. After all, I knew pregnancy could be tough, and I wanted to spoil her. She had been talking about wanting to travel, but my work schedule had always been too busy. Now, with the pregnancy, I planned to take a long break so we could finally go together. I had everything perfectly arranged: balloons, flowers, the gifts laid out beautifully on the dining table. Sarah came home in the evening. As soon as she opened the front door and saw the setup, her expression changed dramatically. She didn't look surprised, in a happy way. Instead, she looked pale and shocked. Thinking she was just tired from her day out, I walked over with a bouquet of flowers. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked gently. "Are you feeling okay?" "No." She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the table filled with gifts, particularly the tiny shoes and toys meant for the baby. "Why did you prepare all this stuff?" Noticing her frown and the strange tone in her voice, I sensed something was seriously wrong. Still, I tried to keep things light, smiling as I wrapped my arm around her shoulder. "The gifts are for the baby, sweetheart, and for you." Hearing that, her pale lips quivered. "How did you know?" That reaction was definitely strange. I couldn't help but ask, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "Babe, what's going on?" Sarah hadn't actually told me about the pregnancy herself. I had found out accidentally a few days earlier when I saw the used pregnancy test hidden in the bathroom trash can. At the time, I assumed maybe she hadn't figured out the right way to tell me yet, or perhaps she was planning her own surprise announcement. But clearly, that wasn't the case. Sarah looked conflicted, avoiding my eyes. Finally, she mumbled, "David, I terminated the pregnancy, I wasn't ready, and it just wasn't the right time." "Then when is the right time?" I demanded, a wave of anger, crushing disappointment, and deep humiliation washing over me. For the first time in our marriage, I raised my voice at her. "Why didn't you talk to me about it first?" She froze, her gaze turning instantly cold and hard. "The decision was mine to make, David," she stated flatly. "I am a person, not just a baby machine." She gave me one last icy look before turning and heading upstairs, leaving me alone in the room filled with symbols of a future that would never happen. Watching her walk away, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at myself. All the effort, the planning, the excitement, it all felt like a cruel joke. This wasn't the first time I had poured my heart into doing something for her, only to receive indifference or rejection in return. That seemed to be the pattern of our relationship. I tried desperately hard to please her, and she remained distant, unmoved. I had fallen for Sarah the moment I first saw her. It was at a party. She was standing alone in a corner, wearing a simple white dress, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes lost in thought. She wasn't conventionally stunning, but there was a cool, aloof aura about her that drew me in irresistibly, like a moth to a flame. After that night, I found out everything I could about her and began pursuing her relentlessly. A month later, we started dating. Our journey from dating to marriage was incredibly fast. barely 3 months in total. After we got married, I consistently put her first. I planned surprises, bought thoughtful gifts, always trying to show her how much I cared. Usually, my efforts were met with a polite but brief "thank you." It felt like there was an invisible wall between us, one I couldn't seem to break down. For 3 years, I kept trying, chipping away at that wall. Gradually, she seemed to warm up slightly. She would occasionally smile genuinely at me, sometimes share her thoughts or feelings. Every small sign of progress filled me with hope. When I discovered she was pregnant, I was absolutely over the moon. I truly believed that having a child together would finally solidify our bond, bring us closer, or so I thought. But Sarah's decision to terminate the pregnancy without even discussing it with me was a harsh wake-up call. It brought everything crashing back to reality. The wall had never really come down. It had always been there. After my initial anger subsided, I started trying to understand why Sarah would do such a thing. I sent a message to my assistant, asking him to discreetly keep an eye on Sarah and report her daily activities back to me. I didn't go back home for the next few days, needing space to think. Sarah never once called or texted to ask where I was. She continued her routine, dressing up nicely and going out every day. Meanwhile, my assistant started sending me photos. They showed Sarah out and about with an unfamiliar man and a little girl. They were shopping together, laughing, visiting theme parks. In the photos, Sarah looked gentle, radiant, and genuinely happy, like a loving wife and a doting mother. This version of Sarah, the warm and engaged woman in the pictures, was someone I had only ever seen in my dreams. The man in the photos, my assistant confirmed, was Alex, Sarah's first love from high school. They had been classmates and had shared an intense teenage romance. It was a classic story, the wealthy girl falling for the poor but charming boy. Her parents strongly disapproved of the relationship, eventually breaking them up and sending Sarah abroad to study. She had returned to our city about 4 years ago. I knew all about Alex when I first pursued Sarah. I knew about their past relationship, but I honestly didn't think it mattered much. It was just a teenage fling, I told myself. How long could those feelings really last? Besides, Alex had gotten married before Sarah even returned from overseas. I hadn't considered him a threat, or worried about him interfering in our lives. But I had clearly underestimated the depth of Sarah's lingering feelings for him. Alex's wife had passed away about a year ago, leaving him to raise their 3-year-old daughter alone. Somehow, Sarah found out about his situation and reconnected with him a while ago. Suddenly, her actions made a sickening kind of sense. No wonder she didn't want to keep our baby. She had been secretly planning to become a stepmother to someone else's child all along. Adding insult to injury, I realized the apartment where Alex was currently living was actually one of my unused investment properties. Sarah had apparently arranged for him to live there. She was using my property, and likely my money, to take care of her first love. When I finally confronted Sarah, laying the photos of her with Alex and his daughter out on the table in front of her, her expression hardened instantly. In a surprisingly arrogant tone, she demanded, "David, did you have someone follow me?" I realized then that perhaps I had been too submissive, too accommodating throughout our marriage, which had made her feel untouchable, unaccountable. Even when presented with clear evidence of her deception, her first instinct was to question my methods rather than explain her actions. I forced myself to tamp down my rising anger, pointing firmly at the photos. "Shouldn't you explain this first?" Sarah frowned, her voice dismissive. "Alex and I are just friends. There's nothing sordid going on, despite what you might think." "Ha!" The sound escaped me, a mix of fury and bitter amusement. "Just friends? You gave up our child so you could take care of your first love and his daughter?" Sarah fell silent for a moment, Then a look of disdain flickered across her eyes. "So what you really want is just a child, right, David?" she accused. "Your so-called love for me is just about wanting me to have your baby. You're so selfish." After being married for 3 years, during which I had always respected Sarah, tried to understand her moods, and never once lost my temper despite her consistent coldness, hearing her call me selfish after she was the one who cheated and lied. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I felt completely clear-headed. Any lingering love or affection I might have felt for Sarah vanished instantly. "There's nothing left to say, Sarah," I stated firmly, my voice devoid of emotion. "Let's get a divorce." "Divorce?" Sarah narrowed her eyes, clearly irritated by my decisiveness. "Even if something did happen between Alex and me, that was all in the past. Now he's struggling to raise his daughter alone, and I'm just helping him out because of our old friendship. Can't you, as a man, be understanding enough to handle that?" "I'm not petty, Sarah," I replied evenly. "But I'm also not going to stand by while my wife uses my money and resources to care for her first love. Do I look like a complete fool to you?" Seeing the cold, resolute expression on my face, her attitude suddenly softened slightly. She sighed, trying a different tactic. "You want kids, David? Fine, I'll give you that. Just not right now. Can you wait a little longer?" She attempted a smile, a hint of pleading hope in her eyes. I responded with a cold, humorless laugh. "I'll have the divorce papers drawn up soon. Just sign them when they're ready." Her attempted smile vanished instantly, replaced by a chilling glare. "David," she warned, "you'll regret this." "I already regret not waking up to the truth sooner," I retorted quietly. "I regret wasting years of my life on this." Sarah moved out of our home shortly after that conversation, still maintaining her arrogant posture. As she left, she declared haughtily, "David, I'll come back when you apologize to me." All she received from me was a cold stare. I remained seated on the sofa, barely acknowledging her departure, and said lazily, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." She slammed the door shut behind her, leaving in a huff of anger. Over the next few days, I had my assistant continue monitoring Sarah's activities. Sure enough, she spent most of her time at Alex's place, accompanying him and his daughter, going shopping almost every day. My phone kept pinging with notifications for credit card charges she was making. I took screenshots of each transaction notification and then called the bank to freeze all of Sarah's supplementary cards linked to my accounts. It wasn't long before she called me, furious. "David, why did you freeze my cards?" "The cards are mine, Sarah," I reminded her calmly. "And so is the money in the accounts they're linked to." "But we're not divorced yet," she argued, her voice rising. "What you earn is communal property. You have no right to freeze the cards." She sounded impatient, entitled. "Sarah," I stated calmly but firmly, "you're not getting another dime from me." "What do you mean by that?" Her voice dropped, sounding uncertain. I simply hung up without further explanation. If she wanted to help people out of her own pocket, that was her business. But everything that belonged to me, I was reclaiming. The next day I went to the apartment where Alex was staying, accompanied by my assistant, Michael, and 2 security guards. The locks hadn't been changed, so I used my fingerprint to easily gain entry. Inside, the 3 of them, Sarah, Alex, and his daughter, were sitting around the table eating lunch. They looked up in surprise, gawking at my unexpected arrival. Sarah reacted first, jumping up from her chair, clearly displeased. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Just clearing out my property," I replied nonchalantly, glancing briefly at her before nodding to the bodyguards. With the guards leading the way, I strolled into the living room and casually sat down on the sofa, Alex stood up too, glaring at me defensively. David, even if you are Sarah's husband, it's not cool to just barge in like this. Ah, so the ex knows who I am, I remarked dryly. That makes things easier. Actually, you're the ones trespassing. I smirked slightly. This house belongs to me. Sarah brought you here without my permission. I'm taking back the house now. You have half an hour to pack your things, or I'll have my men throw you all out. You! Alex clenched his fists, looking like he wanted to step forward, but a glance at the two large, imposing bodyguards flanking me seemed to make him reconsider. Sarah, furious, pointed a finger at me. Why can't they stay here for just a little while longer? You're being unreasonable, David. Unmoved, I raised an eyebrow at Alex. 2 minutes have passed. Are you moving or not? Before Alex could reply, Sarah stepped in front of him protectively. Fine, David, you win, she declared through gritted teeth, her eyes filled with indignation and humiliation. They can stay here. I'll go home with you. I was momentarily stunned into silence. Where did she get the confidence, the delusion, to think I was here to force her to come back home with me? Although there was a child present, and I had no intention of actually throwing anyone out physically, I was fully prepared to call the police if they refused to leave peacefully. Hearing my intention to involve the authorities seemed to make Alex relent. No need for that, he said quickly. We'll leave. Sarah tried to stop him, but Alex shook his head, managing a faint smile. Thanks for your help, Sarah, he said quietly. But let's not make things worse between you two because of me. Sarah looked torn, a mixture of guilt and concern on her face. Okay, she conceded. I'll help you pack. She shot me a look filled with rage. Ignoring her murderous glare, I scanned the apartment and added pointedly, Only take your own personal belongings. Anything that belongs to this apartment or was purchased with my money stays here. David, you're so selfish. Sarah shot me another glare before turning to help Alex pack his things. Alex's daughter, apparently frightened by the confrontation, sat frozen at the table, wide-eyed. When our eyes met briefly, she flinched, tears shining in her eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt like the villain in this situation. Then I shrugged it off. It wasn't my problem. Parents should take care of their own children's emotional well-being. Alex packed quickly. He called out to his daughter, Mia, come on, honey. Mia, it was a nice name. Watching Alex and Sarah interact, a wave of disgust washed over me. Sarah was trailing behind Alex with her suitcase when I suddenly remembered something important. Sarah, wait, I called out. Thinking I had changed my mind and wanted her back, a hint of arrogance returned to Sarah's eyes, even as she tried to maintain her haughty expression. Too late for regrets now, David, she said dismissively. Ignoring her words, I gestured to my assistant, Michael. Give her the papers. Michael nodded, pulled a document from his briefcase, and handed it to Sarah. Divorce papers, I explained calmly. Take a look, and if everything is acceptable, sign them. No need, Sarah cut me off sharply, gritting her teeth. I'll sign them right now. Michael quickly produced a pen and an ink pad. Without even glancing at the contents, Sarah signed her name and pressed her thumbprint onto the documents. She then tossed the agreement dismissively onto my lap, lifting her chin defiantly. So, she sneered, you were trying to use the divorce threat to force me to give in, right? Well, I'm not going to do what you want. After her bold declaration, she walked out of the apartment hand in hand with Alex. I looked down at the signed divorce papers in my hands and felt an immense wave of relief wash over me. It had been way easier than I anticipated. With the signed divorce agreement secured, I swiftly moved to pull all my family's investments from Sarah's family company and terminated all ongoing collaborative projects between our businesses. Her family's company was already struggling financially, essentially surviving thanks to the support and connections provided by my family. Now, without that backing, it was dangling precariously on the brink of bankruptcy once again. Sarah's parents nervously came to see me a few days later. Sarah's dad pushed his glasses up his nose nervously, cautiously asking, "David, did you and Sarah have a fight?" "We got divorced," I stated plainly. "What?" His hand trembled, skewing his glasses on his face. Sarah's mom went pale beside him. "David, please don't act on impulse." She started to plead. "The divorce papers are already signed," I interrupted. "If you don't believe me, ask Sarah yourself." I couldn't be bothered to explain the whole sordid situation to them, so I politely showed them the door. After they left, they must have put significant pressure on Sarah because she stormed into my office the next day. She was still stubborn, refusing to lower her proud head. "So, you got what you wanted," she announced bitterly. "I came back." Tears started to well up in her eyes, and she wore an expression of suppressed pain. "I won't see Alex anymore," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll have your child. Just stop hurting my family's company." This was the first time Sarah had ever cried in front of me, but strangely, I didn't feel anything. No pity, no satisfaction, nothing. I looked at her calmly and said, "You're back just in time. Let's go get the official divorce certificate together." Her tears instantly froze, replaced by a surge of anger. "Enough, David. I've already swallowed my pride and come back to you. What more do you possibly want?" Realizing she had lost her composure, she bit her lip, then tried again, her voice softer. "David, nothing happened between Alex and me that shouldn't have." She still seemed convinced the divorce was just a tactic, a way for me to regain control and bring her back to me. Honestly, I didn't care anymore whether anything inappropriate had happened between them or not. I just wanted this entire mess cleaned up, finished. So I calmly explained again. "I just want a divorce, Sarah, that's it." But she kept shaking her head, refusing to believe me. "I don't believe you," she insisted. Suddenly, talking to her felt utterly exhausting. So Sarah and I ended up in a divorce court battle. However, since the divorce agreement was already signed voluntarily by both parties, and I had photographic evidence and financial records proving her infidelity and misuse of funds, the divorce was finalized relatively quickly by the court. Plus, we had signed a prenuptial agreement before getting married. Whether we divorced amicably or contentiously, Sarah wouldn't receive a dime of my assets. My parents had never fully approved of our marriage in the first place. They had wanted me to marry someone from a family of equal social and financial standing. Sarah's family was close to bankruptcy at the time we met, and marrying her was seen as a potential drain on our family's resources. They had also observed Sarah's consistently cold attitude towards me and realized early on that I was the one putting far more effort into the relationship, making it inherently unbalanced. But I had been determined to marry Sarah, regardless of their objections. This insistence strained my relationship with my parents for a while, but eventually they agreed to the marriage on the condition that we sign a comprehensive prenuptial agreement. The agreement stipulated that during the marriage, my family would provide reasonable assistance to Sarah's family business. However, if we divorced, and I was not deemed legally at fault for the dissolution of the marriage, Sarah would not be entitled to any portion of my personal or family assets. When we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to receive the official divorce certificate, Sarah had lost all her previous arrogance. "David, how could you be so heartless?" she cried again. But her tears weren't from regret, I realized, but from resentment, anger that I was leaving her with nothing. Yet she hadn't thought twice about the consequences of her own actions when she chose to abandon our marriage for her first love. She had always taken my support and affection for granted, never expecting I would finally stand up for myself. "Take care of yourself, Sarah," I said simply, then turned and left without saying anything more. Once I had the official divorce certificate in hand, I felt a sense of closure. Not long after, Sarah's family business was sold off to cover its debts, and her family had to move out of their upscale neighborhood. The drop in their standard of living was undoubtedly significant, but from what I heard, they still managed to live decently. I didn't pay much attention to their affairs after that. The next time I heard any news about Sarah was about 6 months later. My assistant, Michael, hesitated before asking one afternoon, "Mr. David, the front desk received an invitation addressed to you, sent by Miss Sarah. Should I take care of it for you?" Putting down the document I was reading, I raised an eyebrow with mild interest. "Let me see it." Michael handed me the envelope. Opening it, I found a wedding invitation for Sarah and Alex. The wedding was scheduled to take place at a small, rather modest hotel the following weekend. So their friendship had blossomed into true love after all, it seemed. "Michael," I instructed, "prepare a $200 cash gift. You'll accompany me to the wedding that day." "Sure, Mr. David." He nodded and left my office. On the day of the wedding, I showed up dressed in a well-tailored suit. I arrived during the reception, specifically during the toasting session. The venue was bustling, though not particularly grand. Dressed in her white wedding gown, Sarah trailed slightly behind Alex as they moved awkwardly from table to table, greeting guests. Her face was flushed, likely from having had a few drinks. Alex didn't look back at her much, seemingly preoccupied with chatting animatedly with the guests. After a while, Sarah scanned the room, apparently searching for someone. Her eyes lit up when she spotted me standing near the entrance. She whispered something to Alex, and they both walked over together. "David, you came," Sarah said, managing a smile that held a hint of triumph. I nodded curtly. I motioned for Michael to hand Sarah the prepared cash gift envelope. Before Sarah could take it, Alex quickly snatched it up, squeezing the envelope suspiciously. "Is this a check?" he asked. "Nope," I corrected him immediately. $200 cash. Alex's tone turned sarcastic. "Is Mr. David always this stingy at weddings, gifting only $200? Despite his complaint, he eagerly pocketed the cash-filled envelope. I quietly observed the interaction without showing much expression. "Well, not everyone ends up in a situation quite like this," I remarked evenly. "This is actually the first wedding I've ever attended where the couple got married purely out of friendship. I've certainly never seen it among my actual friends." Sarah's face fell at my pointed comment, and she spoke up quickly. "David, I didn't invite you here to cause trouble. I just wanted to show you that I can live perfectly fine without you. I'm really happy now." Yeah, I nodded, forcing a smile. I gave her a slow, deliberate once-over. "Sarah, I'm going to make sure I remember exactly how happy you look right now. It'll make me feel even better when I inevitably see you miserable later on." I didn't wait to see the look on her face, simply turned and walked towards the exit. Just as I stepped outside the hotel, a young woman stopped me in my tracks. "Are you Sarah's ex-husband?" That was her opening line. I didn't rush to answer, taking a moment to look her over first. She was wearing glasses, dressed simply, with no fancy makeup. She looked like she might have just graduated from college. I nodded. "Yeah, do you need something?" She looked serious. "Can we talk?" I didn't have any other plans for the afternoon, so after a moment's hesitation, I agreed. We sat down in a nearby coffee shop, and the young woman introduced herself. "My name is Chloe," she began. "My older sister was Linda, Alex's ex-wife." Chloe explained that her parents had passed away when she was young, and her sister, Linda, had dropped out of high school to work and support Chloe's education. Linda met Alex at one of her jobs. They fell in love, got married, and eventually had their daughter Mia. Things were apparently okay at first, but after Mia was born, Alex changed. He started drinking heavily and became physically abusive, often leaving Linda bruised and battered. Each time, after he sobered up, he would beg for forgiveness, and Linda, perhaps feeling sorry for him or trapped, always held out hope he would change. But the cycle of abuse continued. Chloe had tried repeatedly to convince Linda to get a divorce, but Linda hesitated, primarily for her daughter's sake. She endured the abuse for 3 long years. Finally, after one particularly bad incident where Alex knocked her unconscious, Linda woke up to see her young daughter crying beside her. That was the breaking point. She resolved to end the marriage. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter growing up in constant fear. She decided to file for divorce. But just as she was about to take that step, something terrible happened. Alex had secretly racked up enormous gambling debts. One day, shortly after Linda had sent Mia off to school, debt collectors showed up aggressively at their apartment door. Knowing Linda was the debtor's wife, they demanded money. The situation escalated quickly, turning into a heated argument and then a physical scuffle. In the chaos, they pushed Linda, causing her to fall down a flight of stairs. She hit her head hard, losing a significant amount of blood. By the time paramedics arrived and got her to the hospital, it was too late. Throughout this entire horrific incident, Alex hadn't even stepped out of the apartment. Later, he had the audacity to turn around and demand compensation from the debt collectors for his wife's death. He managed to get the entire debt wiped clean and even walked away with an additional $10,000 in cash. "David, my sister was essentially killed because of Alex," Chloe said. Her eyes wet with tears but filled with a burning hatred as she looked directly at me. "He stole your wife, too. Don't you hate him as much as I do?" Hate might be a strong word, but yes, Alex was clearly a despicable human being. "So," I asked Chloe straightforwardly, "what do you want me to do?" She didn't hold back. "I want custody of my niece, Mia. I came to the wedding today hoping to take her away while things were chaotic. But that jerk Alex must have anticipated something. He hit Mia earlier, and now I can't find her anywhere." Apparently, Alex hadn't even brought his daughter to his own wedding. Chloe's plan had failed, but in the process, she had witnessed the tense interaction between me, Sarah, and Alex. Figuring that the enemy of her enemy might be a potential ally, she had bravely approached me to propose teaming up. After thinking it over for a few minutes, I gave Chloe my phone number and told her to wait for news from me. Then, I immediately tasked Michael with digging into Alex's recent activities and background, as well as verifying Chloe's story. A few days later, Michael handed me a detailed report. Alex's record was, frankly, pathetic. He was known as a no-good troublemaker in high school, didn't even graduate, let alone attend college. He had scrambled to get by working various odd jobs, none of which lasted long. He developed an online gambling addiction, quickly racking up huge debts. He had been living off the compensation money he received after Linda's death, blew through it all, and remained jobless. Even going into his marriage with Sarah, he was unemployed. Sarah must have been blinded by some kind of lingering first love syndrome. I still couldn't fathom why she was so hung up on him. And I bet she didn't know the full extent of his current financial situation. Alex was currently $30,000 in debt from his continued gambling habit. He had never kicked the addiction. The $10,000 he scammed from the debt collectors was long gone, and he had opened new online loan accounts, digging himself even deeper into a hole. Chloe's file, on the other hand, was surprisingly impressive. She was a recent graduate from a top university with stellar academic performance, including several awards for her final year project. She wasn't currently tied to any company. Someone with her skills and drive could bring significant value to a business. It looked like helping Chloe might turn out to be a worthwhile investment. I called her right away. She answered cautiously. "David, have you decided?" "Yeah," I confirmed. "I can help you, but there's a catch." "Go on," she said readily. "Once this situation with Alex is resolved and you have custody of Mia, you have to come work for my company. And you need to sign a 3-year contract." "All right," she agreed without hesitation. "Thank you, Mr. David." Dealing with Alex wasn't particularly difficult. He was the type of person who constantly looked for ways to get rich quick with minimal effort. All I needed to do was dangle the right opportunity in front of him. I arranged for Alex to get hired at a seemingly legitimate, fast-growing company. Within the first month, due to his surprisingly good performance, likely fueled by desperation, he was promoted to team leader. Then, he was promoted again to department manager in the second month. By the end of the third month, the entire company was busted by the authorities for large-scale financial fraud. As a department manager, Alex was swept up in the arrests and held significant responsibility. He ended up receiving a prison sentence of over 10 years. Before all this unfolded, the fraudulent company had actually approached my company seeking investment. I took one look at their financials and business model and immediately declined. They put on a front of engaging in legitimate overseas trading, but behind the scenes, they were clearly exploiting legal loopholes and operating in gray areas. A company like that was bound to get shut down sooner or later. However, after I arranged for Alex to be hired there, I casually mentioned his name to the CEO during a brief, unrelated conversation. This likely led to his rapid, unearned promotions. Alex, it turned out, really excelled at charming people and making himself look good. Not only did he manage to surpass his business targets through questionable means, but he also managed to train a team that produced impressive, though likely fraudulent, results. He probably thought he had finally found the perfect job, the fast track to success he always craved, never knowing that I had orchestrated the entire setup. What awaited him instead were years behind bars. Once Alex was incarcerated, Chloe naturally gained custody of her niece, Mia, without further complications. As agreed, Chloe joined my company shortly after. Her team leader reported to me that she was impressively capable, hard-working, and incredibly eager to learn, a real emerging talent. I was pleased with the outcome. When Alex went to prison, his new wife, Sarah, was, according to Michael's reports, oddly relieved. Alex's massive debt issues had surfaced very quickly after their wedding. After a huge fight, Sarah had painstakingly emptied her own savings account to clear his gambling debts, hoping it would be a fresh start. She even came to see me at my office around that time, showing me bruises and marks on her arms, sobbing about how miserable her life had become. Apparently, after she paid off his debts, leaving her with no more cash to give him, Alex's attitude towards her changed drastically. He complained constantly that she was useless and ordered her to get a job. When she refused, he hit her. Sarah begged me to give her a job at my company, but I didn't oblige. I told her she should call the police, not come to me for employment. But she shot down my suggestion immediately. "No, that'll just make things worse. He'll get even angrier," she insisted, shaking her head vehemently. "David, can't you just help me?" She kept pleading for me to find her a job, seemingly seeing it as her only way out, perhaps hoping to eventually divorce him once she had some financial independence. I gave her my final advice: report the abuse, and then had security escort her out of the building. She looked back as she left, her face a mask of pain, conflict, and perhaps, amidst the despair, a faint hint of regret in her eyes. Alex, being an addict, naturally got bolder once he had a job and some income again, continuing his gambling spree. When he won, He'd celebrate with excessive drinking. If Sarah annoyed him while he was drunk, he'd beat her. When he lost, he'd drink to numb the frustration, and if she seemed idle or questioned him, he'd hit her again. They apparently became frequent visitors at the local police station due to domestic disturbance calls, but Alex always managed to apologize convincingly, and the cycle repeated. Sarah, unable to endure the abuse any longer, asked for a divorce and received another severe beating for her trouble. Alex clearly had no intention of letting go of her easily, likely seeing her as his only remaining financial safety net. Sarah suffered through these agonizing days until Alex finally ended up in prison. With him incarcerated, she was able to file for divorce without fear of immediate retaliation. Seeing her first love revealed in such an ugly, brutal light, she likely felt no remaining attachment. My scheming against Alex had inadvertently helped her escape her miserable situation. I didn't hear much about her after that. Meanwhile, my parents, hearing about Sarah's second failed marriage and knowing that I was still single, started urging me to find someone new again. They came over to my house and began nagging almost the moment they sat down. My mom smiled warmly. "David, I found a wonderful girl for you. She's from a very suitable family, good-looking, sensible, a really great catch. You should meet her." I was about to refuse politely when my dad interrupted firmly. "We listened to you before, David, about Sarah. Now you need to listen to us this time." Their combined pressure left me with little room to refuse. Fine, I thought. I'll just meet her once. Consider it buying her dinner, having a brief chat, and then we both go our separate ways. On the day of the arranged meeting, I dressed casually and arrived at the restaurant to find she was already waiting. She had clearly put a lot of effort into her appearance, elegant dress, perfect makeup, styled hair. I immediately felt guilty for not dressing up more, feeling it was a bit rude not to match her effort. After a simple introduction, an awkward silence fell between us. Perhaps noticing my discomfort, she smiled slightly and handed me the menu. "Why don't you decide what we should eat first?" I awkwardly took the menu, flipping through the pages aimlessly. "David, you're actually quite well known in our social circles," she suddenly said. I paused, looking up at her curiously. The woman, whose name was Wendy, had a cryptic smile on her face. "Known for what?" I asked. "They say," she began, her smile deepening slightly, leaning in conspiratorially, "that you still pine for your ex-wife, even after the divorce." She teased lightly, watching my reaction. I was mystified. Was that really the rumor going around about me? Or was Wendy just testing me, trying to gauge my emotional availability? Realizing the latter was more likely, I told her seriously, "If that were true, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now." She stopped smiling, scanning my face intently for a moment. "All right," she conceded, "but you don't seem very invested in this date." "Sorry," I admitted genuinely, feeling my earlier rudeness. "I was a bit disrespectful by not dressing appropriately. My apologies." Wendy seemed satisfied with my honesty, nodding with a small smile. "So, David," she said, her smile turning playful rather than mysterious, "how about inviting me to a movie next time?" To which I gladly agreed. "I would love to." We ended up having a pleasant dinner, and at the end of the evening we exchanged Instagram handles. I drove her home, and she smiled as she got out of the car, saying she was looking forward to our next meeting. Our second date was set for the following weekend. This time I made sure to dress nicely. I bought movie tickets in advance and also picked out a gift for her. When I picked her up, I immediately presented her with the gift box. Wendy seemed a bit surprised, but I explained it was my way of making up for my previous perceived rudeness. She appeared impressed. When she opened the box, she found a beautiful diamond necklace inside. Seeing her genuine delight, I knew I had chosen the gift well. As I helped her fasten the necklace, her eyes sparkled with joy. "Thank you, David. I love it," she exclaimed, "though now I'm troubled about what return gift I should give you." "No need," I instinctively refused, but she immediately got serious. "Reciprocity is key in any relationship, David," she stated firmly. "It can't just be one person giving all the time." Her words took me aback, and I suddenly thought of Sarah again. I had given Sarah countless gifts over the years, but she had never once given me anything meaningful in return. I had been foolishly pouring everything into the relationship, not realizing that this lack of balance, this lack of reciprocity, was a major red flag. Wendy's simple statement reminded me of this important lesson. So I didn't refuse her intention anymore. I just smiled and said, "Well, in that case, I'll look forward to it." We had some time before the movie started, so we decided to do some window shopping on the 3rd floor of the mall before heading up to the cinema complex on the 6th floor. As we were getting our tickets checked at the cinema entrance, I heard someone behind us quietly say, "Oh." I glanced over my shoulder and realized the ticket checker was Sarah. It was a bit surprising to see her there, but not entirely shocking. Normally, someone with her background, having studied abroad, even if the degree wasn't earned, wouldn't end up working as a simple ticket checker. But I knew her degree wasn't worth much. It had essentially been bought with her family's money. She hadn't held a real job since returning home, marrying me quickly to enjoy the comfortable lifestyle of a wealthy wife. Now, her life circumstances had forced her to work, but with zero actual work experience, her job options were likely very limited. She could probably handle something as straightforward as checking movie tickets. I just glanced at her briefly and continued walking into the theater lobby with Wendy. I assumed Sarah would be busy with her job and wouldn't try to disturb me, but she actually reached out and stopped me just as we were about to enter the theater. She looked at me pitifully, her eyes pleading. "David," she whispered, "why did you pretend not to know me?" Honestly, I was speechless for a moment. "This isn't the place, Sarah," I finally said, keeping my voice low. "Aren't you supposed to be working right now?" I reminded her gently. She saw the line of people waiting impatiently behind her to get their tickets checked and reluctantly pulled her hand back. I didn't look at her again and walked away with Wendy. Inside the theater lobby, Wendy asked curiously, "Who was that just now?" "My ex-wife," I replied simply. There was no point in hiding it. Wendy nodded knowingly. Not wanting her to overthink the encounter, I added, "I didn't know she worked here. We won't come to this theater next time." "It's okay," Wendy flashed a bright, confident smile. "I'm not worried." Her radiant smile instantly erased any lingering doubts or awkwardness I felt about the encounter. After the movie, Wendy and I walked out arm in arm. I wasn't quite used to such sudden intimacy, and my movements felt a bit stiff and awkward. Just as we stepped out of the theater exit, Sarah approached us again. Seeing Wendy clinging to my arm, Sarah's expression hardened. "David, who is she?" she demanded, staring intently at me, perhaps still hoping for something, some sign that I still cared. "This is my girlfriend, Wendy," I stated clearly. As soon as the words left my mouth, Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "I don't believe you," she insisted. "You knew I worked here. You just brought someone here on purpose to upset me, right, David? I give up. Can we not get back together?" Her reaction was ridiculous, still fooling herself after everything that had happened. "Sarah," I said patiently, "unlike you, I'm not intimate with just anyone. All my affection is reserved for my partner." I made my position clear. Any lingering hope in Sarah's eyes slowly faded away. She wiped away a tear that escaped and walked away without another word. Watching her retreating figure, Wendy whispered beside me, "She seems a bit unstable." "Maybe," I replied casually. Going from a pampered princess lifestyle to struggling to make a living, all within a year, it's probably a lot for anyone to handle. I paused, then turned to Wendy. Anyway, when did I officially become your girlfriend? Wendy suddenly challenged me, a playful glint in her eye. I chuckled, feeling a bit embarrassed. Just now when Sarah was pestering me, I admitted. I instinctively used you as a shield, but, I added seriously, I have been thinking seriously about my potential relationship with you, Wendy. Moving into an official relationship right now might feel a bit too quick. If you feel uncomfortable. I want something more with you too, David, she interrupted softly, her expression sincere. We can take our time getting to know each other, I finished my thought, then processed what she had just said. Wait, really? Wendy just laughed softly. You dummy, she teased gently. Can't you tell I did that on purpose just now? Helped you out? Her words clicked. She had deliberately played along, helping me out of the awkward situation with Sarah. I thanked her warmly. Thank you, Wendy. You're welcome, David, she replied, then added with a smirk, looking like a clever fox. Looking forward to it. I couldn't help but laugh with her, feeling something subtle yet uplifting shift between us. Looking forward to it too, Wendy. I still had a lot to learn about relationships, about trusting again, about building something real. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I had time to figure it out.